everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Leanna. We are going super casual today. I am very fuzzy. So today we are going to be talking about the beauty industry, but we are going to be talking about white privilege in the beauty industry. Now, white privilege, of course, extends far beyond the beauty industry, but I wanted to talk about the beauty industry because we do a lot of beauty related things here on my channel. And obviously I can only ever come at you from the perspective of a white individual, which is why I always like to link other perspectives when I do topics like these. It's always very good to get other perspectives that are not just mine to consume. And so I'll have all of those linked for you down below. And you know, as a white person, I always kind of worry about overstepping my bounds. Is it okay for me to talk about things like this? And so there is that worry, but also this white silence also feeds into white apathy and a fear of being called out. So I'm going to speak and know that I may not say this 100% correctly, and I welcome criticism. If you think that I should have done this differently, let me know, and I can consider that for future topics. So having said that, let's just talk a little bit about what white privilege is. I'm going to keep offering up more and more examples as we move throughout the video. Most of them are going to be in relation to the beauty industry, but we kind of need to talk about contextually in general what white privilege is so you can get like a bigger picture of it. And I am going to be looking down because whenever I talk about a really big issue, I need to take notes so that I remember where I'm going with this. One of the things about fibromyalgia is you get fibro fog, as they call it. And you might misremember things and just suddenly like blank out what was I saying. So I always have notes. And so white privilege was actually coined by a white person named Peggy McIntosh as part of her studies in the 1980s. And it was likened to having an invisible weightless knapsack. And this invisible weightless knapsack is something that every white person is born with. And the knapsack is filled with advantages in life. So you can't see it, you don't feel it. And so as white people, we go through life, we genuinely have no idea that we have these things around us because most of the time they're so deeply ingrained in society, we just genuinely don't have to think about these things. But the funny thing is though about white privilege, as soon as you mention any word privilege, people get really upset. Some of you may have even seen the title and the thumbnail of this video come in just long enough to thumbs it down and then walked away. You didn't even want to hear what I had to say. And I mean, that's okay, but it's not a character assassination against anybody. And hearing that word privilege doesn't necessarily mean that a person hasn't struggled in life and that they haven't worked hard. Likewise, it doesn't mean that, say, a black person isn't wealthy and successful. What it means is that if you're white and you've struggled, your struggles weren't because of your race. Take my recent video on disability, the fact that I have had to struggle with income support and health issues. Those are struggles, but they have nothing to do with the fact that I'm white. And so a lot of people hear that word privilege and they say, well, how dare you? How can you say that I'm privileged? I live below the poverty line. And that wouldn't happen if people had white privilege, like you say. But consider the fact that if there's like any person living under the poverty line and they're white, they didn't get there because they're white. Whereas approximately 40% of the black population in the US is living under the poverty line. And that's due to institutionalized racism. And keep in mind too that 40% of the black population in the US is living under the poverty line. There's only 13% of the population in the US is black people. So that's a lot. Because if you think about this process, there was slavery, then there was segregation, and Jim Crow laws, And then Black people weren't allowed to have the same jobs as us, as white citizens. And then mass incarceration happened, which we're still going through. And this is a very, very much an oversimplification of everything that's been happening. But you can see then how historically white people have oppressed Black people, not to mention other races. And it's no good for us to say, well, that was my ancestors, that wasn't me, because Black people are still living with the consequences of what our ancestors did to them, and some of them still alive and were living during some of the aforementioned eras I just said. So if Black people are still living with that, we are still benefiting from that. And that's white privilege. So now let's segue into the beauty industry. Starting with the fact that we as white people tend to derail conversations that have nothing to do with us, such as race, such as shade range. So you may have noticed this yourself. If you go into a post about a new foundation or concealer launch, and let's say it has 30 shades or 40 shades, the shades are not very good, and people are very vocal about that. There's always going to be people on the fairer end of the spectrum, such as myself, bringing up the fact that, oh, but did you notice there's only 1 or 2 fair shades? That's not very inclusive. Where are my shades? When chances are there's actually quite a few fair shades. And even if there are not, there are significantly more white shades than shades for people of color. And if you haven't seen this and you think I'm exaggerating, you should go on to any post made by Trend Mood on Instagram that has to do with a complexion product. You could go into any foundation review made by a person such as Nima Tang, Too Much Mouth, and you can go into any Reddit discussion that has to do with the previous 2 things I just mentioned. And so why is this such a big deal? Well, I should point out that I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that I'm fair and I have a little bit of trouble finding foundations. I'm fair and I have had a little bit of trouble finding foundations in the past. Not so much nowadays. So it's more about the intent and the delivery behind these comments. The intent to be to decenter Blackness in shades for deeper skin tones and to center whiteness in shades for white people. And the delivery being to compare and conflate the struggle of finding a paler shade with the struggle of finding a deep shade. And they're not the same thing. Also consider the fact that before Nima Tang started her Darkest Shade series, there were no Lightest Shade or Palest Shade series. This was done in direct response to her series. That's questionable. For example, one of the first people to do this was racist, sexist John McClane. He and most others, with a few exceptions, gave no credit to Nima for starting this series. So they just piggybacked off of her success in order to create their series about lighter shades and gave no thought to the fact that the Darkest Shade was started as a way to discuss the very real lack of deep shades in the beauty industry, which is a direct symptom of systemic racism in the beauty industry. Creation of a Palest Shade series suggests a correlation between the two, when one is a symptom of a much larger problem and one is not. So now we're getting to the main crux of why pale shades and deep shades are different. If you're white, like I am white, regardless of your actual skin depth and tone, I'd like you to ask yourself if you have ever actually felt underrepresented in the beauty industry. Have you grown up seeing people of your race in commercials, in print ads, or on social media marketing? Can you search for and find reviews of a product on someone with a similar skin tone to you? Can you search for and find specific tutorials on someone with a similar skin tone to you? Can you roam the beauty aisles and find products from every brand that work for you? Even if you cannot find a precise foundation and or concealer match, are you able to find loose powders, eyeshadows, blushes, bronzers, contours, highlighters, and lipsticks? Can you go to an individual makeup store or counter and find an employee of your race? Can you find an employee who is well educated in makeup application on somebody of your race? Can you be assured that if you go into a store that sells makeup, that you won't be treated differently because of your race? And I don't know about you, but I can answer yes to all of these. This is white privilege. And again, it extends far, far beyond the beauty industry, if I have only just slightly touched on prior to this. But as this is a video about the beauty industry specifically, I'm going to try and stick to that as much as possible. This is why you and me and we, assuming you're white, we're not excluded. We're not excluded by any company that doesn't happen to have our specific shade, because the entire beauty industry caters to white people. And it always has. If there are, for example, 30 shades of a foundation being released, and not one of them fits you, but out of 30 shades, 28 of those shades are still made for your race, that's a lot to choose from, as opposed to having only 2 shades out of 30 made for your race and having none of those fit. And aside from the previous examples already given on white privilege, there are just so many things that we as white people give no thought to on a daily basis. For example, prior to Fenty Beauty, how many of us noticed a lack of inclusivity in the beauty industry? Because Black, Indigenous people of color, they've always known, they've always seen this. They always saw flaws in the beauty industry, pointed it out, said this, and had to navigate it. And it wasn't until recently that we just picked up on that fact and were like, oh, you're right. Things such as choosing to release less than 10 shades in a complexion line. Choosing to release 30 shades, but only 2 or 3 are tacked on the end for deeper skin tones. Releasing deeper shades after the initial launch, because they're an afterthought. Huge discrepancies in undertone for the deeper shades, such as having gray and orange undertones that fit nobody. Releasing light mixers but no dark mixers. Releasing powder products that won't fit anybody over an NC30. Using nothing but white models in ad campaigns. Reposting nothing but white models on social media. Using models of all ethnicities and racial backgrounds, but not having any products in your actual line that fit them. Making darker shades but refusing to sell them in stores. Refusing to make products for Black women because Black people don't buy makeup, even though they buy billions every year. And have you noticed how frequently and how easily and how much we praise white YouTubers for speaking up on these issues, even though Black, Indigenous people of color have been speaking up about this for years, for their entire lives? But a white person suddenly chimes in and says, you know what? I think the shade range could be better. And we're like, yes, you're so woke. There's something wrong with that. That we're applauding basic levels of human decency and people doing 1/10 of the work. We're giving them that much more praise. And of course, all of this is not even to even begin to mention being a Black, Indigenous person of color in the social media space, such as Jackie Aina, Alyssa Ashley, Nima Tang, and the types of comments they receive online, how much more harshly they're treated. So take Alyssa Ashley. People are constantly pitting her against her sister or her good friend Jackie Aina. And it's not friendly competition. That's not what this is about. It's cruel and it's unnecessary. People genuinely are trying to pit these women against each other. For example, by saying that Alyssa should be showing Jackie how to work her equipment properly or in a better way, which basically just says that Jackie doesn't know what she's doing. Let's have Alyssa come in and help her. That's messed up. That's basically just undermining another woman's work. And additionally, people love to jump on Alyssa every time she responds to a person's comment saying that she's being rude, mean, and usually it's the initial comment that's being rude or mean, and Alyssa is just trying to handle herself. And you know that if she were white, people wouldn't be saying anything at all, or they would be treating her like, I don't know, Samantha Ravindall, who everybody loves. She could do no wrong. Like Nima Tang, every time her videos make it to trending, she's bombarded with racist comments. Her Darkest Shade series is one of the ones constantly being inundated with the comments I mentioned earlier. All of the fair people coming in and being like, you know what? We need shades too. Clearly this isn't just your problem, it's our problem. She's trying to speak specifically about deeper shades. This isn't the place for that. Her recent video on Fenty Beauty's new concealers, powders, and foundation shades received a lot of rude comments. All of them hating on the way that she chose to apply each product, even though I've seen other popular white YouTubers apply things in the exact same way and they received none of these types of comments. They get told that their reviews are so amazing and so helpful. Instead, Nima gets called negative, nitpicky, and her review is called useless. Even as she calls to light the very real issue of the fact that even though there are 50 shades in the new Fenty concealer, there isn't one deep enough for her to contour with. And that's one of the uses behind this concealer, is contouring. So it just goes to show that you can have 50 shades, but there's always going to be a little bit of room for improvement. And of course, Jackie, who can't go 1 week without receiving some sort of thread on Reddit, sometimes not even 24 hours, usually full of horribly bitter comments. Jackie always speaks her minds on issues of race and her experiences with racism. It's never going to be enough. She's always labeled as too loud, the angry black woman. She doesn't speak up enough. She speaks up too much. Oh, wait, she just isn't saying it the way that we white people feel like we need to hear it in order for it to sound palatable. Like I said, it will never be good enough. Take her comments made about white people not saying, excuse me. This was in relation to a very real incident that she experienced and many others have experienced. It's a microaggression. And everybody was coming in and telling her, that's racist. You're speaking about white people broadly. I'm taking offense to that. That's racist. You can't speak about white people like that. And it's not racist. And of course, everybody was also tripping over each other to be like, well, no, I say excuse me, I say excuse me, I say excuse me. And clearly Jackie hasn't been to where I live and where I'm from. We all say excuse me. People were making like entire response videos about this one tweet that she put out saying it's like reverse racism towards white people. How you just, like, if it had been a white person tweeting about black people not saying excuse me, it would have been called racist and just all these false equivalences. It was a huge deal, and it should not have been a huge deal. And we shouldn't be telling her, no, that didn't happen. Or, you know what, I'm the exception to this because I'm a good person. Just stop. The point is, though, that black women are treated differently. and held to a completely different and impossibly high standard. Compared to white people, look no further than Jeffree Star, who's been a racist and misogynist for years, even longer than we as a community knew about this. And he's even attacked Jackie Aina before. He's compared her to an animal. He has accused her of not paying her taxes. And I don't know if he has used the N-word in this situation, but I know she is not the only Black woman that he has done this to. And still, we are more likely to forgive him and watch him than Jackie. We look for excuses to keep watching a person like Jeffree Star and look for excuses to stop watching Jackie and other Black women. Like, it gets to a point where it's like, oh, Jackie just used a product that I hate. She's canceled, unsubbed. And that's not even really a huge exaggeration at this point. It's really not. Like, people are genuinely going out of their way to find the littlest thing that they don't like about her, and that's it. Whereas, for example, when Jeffree did a documentary series on YouTube during the summer with another racist YouTuber, Shane Dawson, people were like, oh my god, I love him so much now. And all of the racists, closet racists, if you can even be a closet racist, I don't really believe you can, came out of the woodwork. And if you were to mention Jeffree Star on a place like Reddit, if you said something negative about him, suddenly you were the one being downvoted. And everyone else was being upvoted. Just like that. And so every time a white content creator does something horrible, they suffer zero consequences. But we are actively watching and waiting for Black content creators to fail and to do something that we can call them out for. Her camera clicks. Unsubbed. She wears too many wigs. Unsubbed. She sings too much. Unsubbed. 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 White content creators can steal and profit off of the cultures of Black, Indigenous people of color. And again, we praise it. We love them for it. Actual white makeup artists doing their makeup in blackface, wearing tribal face paint and headdresses. And their comments are filled with people just saying shit like, slay, yes, queen. But if you genuinely want to report this, nothing happens. Like, take this image here of a guy who did his entire makeup in blackface. He reposts the image every so often for attention, and people are telling him to take it down, and he doesn't, and Instagram won't. So reporting these things for racism gets you nowhere. Even when the content creators escalate their racial violence post by post, this speaks to the way social media prioritizes white people and their comfort. Every time a white creator is able to escape a scandal without their subscriber or follower count dropping, their ad revenue dropping, their sponsors leaving, that is white privilege. It happens all too frequently. Just look at somebody like Laura Lee, who was found to have made several racist tweets, horribly racist tweets. And you know what they did? They took her products off the shelves of a few different suppliers for a couple of months and then reinstated them and reinstated her affiliate codes. That's not a consequence. That's not a punishment. Even if you were to look outside of the beauty industry just for a moment, Megyn Kelly, who worked at NBC, I believe, she said racist things on air and either left or was fired, she still received $69 million. They still paid her the rest of her contract. That is white privilege. So the bottom line here is that the way these industries work is wrong. And you can say, well, these are isolated incidents. Don't make this about race. You're being divisive. If you say this, you're not paying attention. These are not isolated incidents, and this is about race. If we ignore inequity and white privilege, then we are the ones upholding these inequities and white privilege. As a white person, you have to be willing to give up this privilege in order to create more equal power structures. And the reality is most of us are not willing to do that. This is why so many of us freak out over something as little as a foundation range. If the shades are equal, or if there are even more deep shades than light shades, we throw a fit. We throw a conniption, because that's not what we're used to. And how dare a company cater to people who aren't white? And think about that. Think about how messed up that is. To have a brief moment in time, a very, very small thing where things look equal, or where whiteness isn't the center of attention. And we can't stand that. So what does that say about us? And what does that say about a future as a society if we can't stand a picture where we are not at the top? Because that's what white supremacy is, keeping white people on top and feeling superior to others. And one of the things I would highly recommend that you do today, if you haven't already, because I keep linking it on my social media, is the Me and White Supremacy Workbook by Layla Saad. It's 28 days and it's free as of right now, though I do highly recommend that you pay her for her work. And by doing this, you will be able to self-examine all of the different behaviors that you have within yourself that link up to white supremacy, including feelings of superiority and centering yourself, and many of the different things we discussed today, like privilege. So that's one of the things I'm going to leave below for you. I'm going to leave that here for today. I would love to hear your thoughts about this. How do you feel about a beauty industry that caters to white people? Do you feel that's true? And how does that make you feel? Like, do you freak out when you see something that doesn't cater to you? Anyway, all of the resources I link below, I highly recommend that you view them, read them, take the time. Thanks so much for watching this video. I post Mondays and Fridays here on this channel in the afternoons Eastern Time. Thanks so much for sticking around, and I will see you soon. Bye, everyone.